It's time for a much-needed reality check on the global EV transition. The whole thing has been actually very similar to driving an EV. It started strong for a while, but it didn't last long and has now completely run out of juice. The battery is flat and the charging stations are all out of order. Rather than accelerating towards the finish line, the fantasy of an EV utopia has broken down and is limping towards a humiliating failure. Almost everyone with a functioning brain realises that mandating 100% EVs by 2035 is simply unachievable, and attempting to meet that target will essentially finish off the entire Western automotive industry, and all the jobs and economic benefits that go with it. The manufacturers know this, the car dealers know this, the vast majority of the general public knows this, and the only ones that don't are the bureaucrats and politicians infected with the dreaded net zero mind virus. They're the only ones who believe they can just wave a magic wand and, in barely a decade's time, a century of combustion technology and development will simply be dumped into the garbage can of history, and we'll all just start driving battery cars instead. Despite the fact that a large proportion of car owners don't have the luxury of a driveway on which to charge overnight and will be queuing for ages at a public charging station. That's assuming that the electricity grid is still functioning after it is converted to unreliable weather-powered windmills and solar panels. Only a politician could have devised such a harebrained scheme and believe it would actually work. So it's good to see that the rest of the world is rapidly backing away from these punishing mandates. We'll come on to the main story in a minute, but in Australia we're still imposing ever greater emissions limits on our new cars, which is essentially an EV mandate in disguise. But finally, we're hearing some opposition to it, at last. It's impossible to sell 6 million EVs to meet Labour's 2035 emission target, National Senator. A report indicated that to meet the 2035 emissions target, half of all new light vehicles sold in Australia between now and 2035 would need to be electric. Fat chance of that happening. The feasibility of the Labour government's 2035 net zero target has been called into question after a Liberal senator revealed that it is impossible for Australian car dealers to sell the required number of EVs within the next decade. In September 2025, the Albanese government released its latest ambitious climate change target, aiming to bring Australia's carbon emissions down to 62 to 70% below 2005 levels by 2035. The government also announced a roadmap that focuses on 5 priority areas and a $9 billion spending package to fast-track the initiative. At the time, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese touted the new target as a responsible one that is backed by the science. Yes, we must all genuflect to the science, backed by a practical plan to get there and built on proven technology. Climate Change Minister Chris Blackout Bowen also said the initiative was the government's most feasible decarbonisation pathway beyond 2030. A report by the Climate Change Authority indicated that to meet the 2035 emissions target, the number of EVs on Australian roads must increase more than 20-fold over the next decade, and that half of all new light vehicles sold between now and 2035 would need to be electric. This translates to a national EV fleet of more than 5 million over the next decade. At a recent Senate estimates hearing, National Senator Bridget McKenzie pointed out that such a figure was unlikely to be achievable. Understatement. She explained that the automobile sector had admitted that they could not sell that many EVs in the coming decade. The actual industry body that represents both the producers and marketers of electric vehicles, hybrids, and also represents those who are seeking to develop hydrogen technologies has said on the maths that it's actually impossible to sell in excess of 6 million new electric vehicles by 2035, which is actually what this plan requires to be done if the target is to be met, she said. It's absolutely astonishing that this kind of stuff has to be pointed out. I mean, it's so obviously madness, but it takes somebody to actually stand up and say it. And of course, the industry bodies know this full well that it's never going to meet that target. After Labour released its 2035 emissions target, the Federal Chamber of Automotive Industries, FCAI, raised concerns about the challenges the sector would face in meeting it. In September, FCAI Chief Executive Tony Webber said the sale of battery electric vehicles accounted for less than 8% of new vehicle sales so far in 2025. A figure well below the level projected by the Climate Change Authority as necessary to meet Australia's 2035 target. Well, the Climate Change Authority lives in a bubble, isolated, insulated from reality. They think they can just dispense wisdom from on high and the economy will follow and car buyers will follow. Well, that's just not going to happen. And Australia is a very difficult place to put electric cars in because we are a huge country with very dispersed populations and infrastructure, and trying to make a grid based on wind and solar in a country like this is just impossible, as they're finding out. But there may be some sanity returning to the rest of the world. The rest of the world is following America's retreat on EVs. Canada, UK and European Union back off electric vehicle targets as economic reality sets in, and even China shows cracks. The US retreat from its electric vehicle ambitions is spreading around the globe. In Canada, Prime Minister Mark Carney paused an electric vehicle sales mandate that was set to take effect next year. In the UK, Prime Minister Keir Starmer has allowed for a more flexible timetable to hit the country's EV targets. And the European Union last month bowed to pressure from automakers to rethink, a year earlier than planned, its 2035 target for eliminating carbon dioxide emissions from cars. There's this realisation that, hey, this transformation isn't going as fast as we want, said Patrick Schaufus, a partner at consulting firm McKinsey. EVs aren't smartphones. The reality is hitting hard in the US. General Motors said Tuesday that it would take a $1.6 billion with a B dollar charge because of sinking EV sales, a shift it blamed on recent moves by the US government to end EV subsidies and regulatory mandates. The automaker has lobbied heavily this year to loosen EV requirements. That might just be the beginning of a financial reckoning from automakers that poured billions into new electric models, from sports cars and sedans to big pickups and sport utility vehicles, to try to get ready for the government-backed EV mandates. Automakers have been saying that consumers aren't adopting EVs as quickly as expected, and government efforts to proliferate the technology are hammering their bottom lines. GM, in announcing its charge, said it is reassessing EV capacity and warned that more losses are possible. There is more realism that EVs are probably a good solution in the future, maybe, but it's not going to be forced down the throat of customers, said Christian Meunier, chairman of Nissan Americas, referring not just to the US, but to much of the Western world. It's pragmatism. Yes, you can lead a horse to water, you cannot make it drink. You cannot make people who want combustion cars, they want the practicality and convenience of combustion cars, you cannot make them buy EVs with their own money. That's why they need subsidies, incentives and tax breaks. That's the only way you're going to get people to buy them, i.e. with other people's money. Even China, the world's most dominant EV market, is showing cracks. Sales continue to grow, but increasingly at the expense of profitability as car makers fight for customers in an oversaturated market. Consulting firm Alex Partners predicts that most of the 118 EV brands operating there in 2023 won't be viable 5 years from now. Where China has doubled down on EVs, Japan has largely avoided the tumult by pushing for vehicles that pollute less without requiring specific technologies. The country includes hybrids in government targets, as it should. This is the reality. This is pragmatism. You don't force a particular technology. You don't pick a winner. What you do is you say you want to reduce emissions and it has to be technology neutral. And then there's all sorts of options. There's hybrids, there's plug-in hybrids, there's biofuels or synthetic fuels, all sorts of ways that you can gradually reduce emissions without being forced to adopt a particular technology. And I think we're at the point where most countries are realizing this. Most countries are realizing that you cannot mandate a particular technology on people. I always go back to the compact fluorescent light debacle where we were all forced to buy those awful curly fluorescent tubes to replace our incandescent lights, and they were horrible, and if you broke one you needed a hazmat team to come to your house. And then of course LEDs became cheaper and did the job, and suddenly nobody needs compact fluorescent lights anymore, and they have been consigned rightly to the dustbin of history. This is just not going to happen. There will be combustion cars on the road for decades, if not a century more to come, because people will keep using them, they will keep maintaining them, and they'll want to keep driving them. So to say that we're all going to buy electric cars in 2035 is just pure insanity. All right, that's it for this one. Now, I've linked both of these articles down below. Hopefully you'll be able to read them. They are paywalled, but I'll put in an unpaywalled version so you can read them. Long articles, well worth a read. Hope you enjoy them. All right, that's it for this one. Thanks very much for watching. See you in the next one. Bye for now. If you'd like to support this channel and display your anti-EV credentials to your Tesla-owning neighbours at the same time, why not buy some awesome MGUY merchandise, like this mug, this baseball cap, or this t-shirt. Each high-quality item sports the MGUY No EVs sign, and they're all made to order, perfect for irritating the hell out of your local EV zealots. Visit store.mguy.tv or click the link in the description to check out the full range of products. And of course, you can always just buy me a coffee. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code on screen. Thanks very much for watching. Really hope you enjoyed it. If you've got any tips or stories, go there. If you'd like to watch another video, go there. If you'd like to buy me a coffee, go there. And please subscribe to the channel.